Sandy Hook School. Callers indicated she thinks someone is shooting the building. Those were the first words sent out by 911 dispatchers to law enforcement who would be responding to Sandy Hook Elementary on December 14, 2012. Shooter Adam Lanza opened fire in the school with several guns, including a semi-automatic AR-15 assault rifle. This tragedy rekindled the ongoing debate over gun control in the United States, especially here in Ohio. Many states are now passing new gun control legislation. Ohio should not consider adopting such laws because gun control is not a viable solution to this country's problems with violence. It is ineffective, is nearly impossible to implement, deflects attention from the real issues, and is a violation of the Second Amendment. Citizens of Ohio need to make their voices heard on this issue. One reason gun control is ineffective is because it will not keep guns out of the hands of criminals. Jay Watchell, an ATF agent, states many guns used in criminal activity are obtained through straw purchases. These are gun sales where a person who cannot obtain a gun has another person buy the weapon for them. Another way to illegally obtain a firearm involves licensed gun dealers. Sometimes guns are stolen from these dealers, but some dealers also engage in illegal sales. An ATF report indicates numerous guns used in criminal activity can be traced back to licensed gun dealers. Criminals can also easily obtain guns from unlicensed dealers who sell guns on the street. Watchell states, "Let's be honest, if someone wants a gun, it's obvious the person will not have difficulty buying a gun, either legally or through extensive United States black market. Laws already exist to prevent straw purchases, illegal sales from licensed or unlicensed dealers, and gun thefts, but they are not preventing these activities. So, it is unreasonable to believe new legislation will be any more effective. Gun control simply will not keep firearms away from criminals. Gun control will also endanger lives by taking firearms away from law-abiding citizens. Each year, people who own guns legally defend themselves against criminals. The question is, how many? Advocates and opponents of gun control wage a war of statistics on this issue. Researcher and criminologist from the Florida State University, Gary Kleck, claims defense gun user, or DGU, occurs 2 million times per year, based on his survey. Meanwhile, David Hemingway, a public health researcher at Harvard University, argues with Kleck's conclusion and estimates the actual number for DGU occurrences to be about 100,000, based on a project by the National Crime Victimization Survey. Other scholars have looked at both sets of data and estimate the true number to be 250,000 to 300,000 instances of DMG per year. Even the most conservative number of 100,000 is considered. That is, 100,000 people who could have been victims, but were not because they had a firearm. Gun control would take weapons away from these people, forcing them to be victims. Gun control will not reduce crime. This is yet another area that has become a war of statistics between gun control and advocates and opponents. A recent Harvard study conducted by criminologist Professor Don Cate and Professor Gary Mauser concluded that countries with stricter gun laws do not have less gun violence. Likewise, countries with more guns do not have more deaths. In fact, the opposite is true. Countries with stricter gun laws have significantly higher murder rates than other countries with more lenient gun laws. For example, Norway has the highest rate of gun ownership in Western Europe, but has the lowest murder rate. Holland has the lowest rate of gun ownership in Western Europe, yet has nearly the worst murder rate. Clearly, gun control efforts are not working in other countries, but there is another example of its failure right in our nation's capital. In 1976, Washington, D.C. instituted a gun ban. Between 1976 and 1991, when the ban was in place, the city's homicide rate rose 200%, while the homicide rate in the U.S. rose 12% in the same time frame. In fact, there's significant evidence that shows gun ownership may actually reduce gun violence. According to the Florida Department of State Concealed Weapons Statistical Report, after Florida passed its concealed carry law, the homicide rate involving all firearms decreased 37%, and the homicide rate related only to handguns went down 41%. Gun control clearly does not reduce crime. Gun control laws are almost impossible to enforce. Colorado recently passed legislation banning ammunition magazines holding more than 15 rounds and prohibiting private transfer of firearms. Now sheriffs in Colorado have brought a lawsuit that will be heard in federal court. Sheriff John Cook stated the laws were unenforceable and gave a false sense of security. Sheriff Mike Lewis stated the laws require deputies to enter private homes to enforce the law, which would put deputies in danger. A number of sheriffs state enforcing the laws would require them to violate people's constitutional rights. A similar situation is occurring in New York, where the state troopers have declared Governor Cuomo's new gun law unenforceable. If a law enforcement officials cannot support these gun laws, how can they possibly be enforceable? Ohio should not follow down the same path as Colorado and New York. Blaming gun use for recent tragedy deflects attention from the real issues. Often people look for easy answers when trying to solve serious problems, and that is the case with mass shootings and the focus on guns. In reality, there are underlying issues that need to be addressed, such as mental health care, identification of disturbed or dangerous individuals, and improved security in many public areas, including schools. A recent survey of 15,000 law enforcement individuals showed 99% of them believed other policy issues to be more important than gun control, including creating a better mental health care system, establishing better school security, and instituting harsher penalties for criminals to be kept off the streets. A greater deal of time, energy, and money is being wasted in the promotion of gun control. These resources could be used to solve the more important underlying issues behind these tragedies. Looking at Sandy Hook, what if better mental health care had been available to Adam Lanza? This would probably have been far more helpful than only having access to smaller ammunition magazines. This misguided focus on gun control is deflecting attention from the real problems and preventing the formation of solutions. The Second Amendment does not allow for gun control. There has been much debate in this country about the interpretation of the Second Amendment and whether or not gun control is unconstitutional. The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. The question is the interpretation of these words, and there are three basic models to viewing their meaning. One model, called the Standard Model, recognizes individuals' right to keep and bear arms unrelated to militia service. Recent court cases have upheld this model. In 2008, the Supreme Court case District of Columbia v. Heller held that the individual right to keep a firearm for lawful purposes was protected under the Second Amendment. In 2010, the Supreme Court case of McDonald v. Chicago clarified the 2008 decision, further supporting gun rights at the state level. With these recent court rulings in mind, gun control is simply not supported by the Second Amendment and is therefore unconstitutional. In considering the entire gun control issue in Ohio, it is important to look past the hype and manipulation of data and focus on the real issues behind gun violence. We need to improve our mental health care system along with developing strategies for identifying disturbed or dangerous individuals and getting them the care they need. Additional security measures need to be taken in our schools and other public places. Our resources are currently being wasted on a misguided fight for gun control, which is ineffective and unforceable. Ohioans need to stand up and speak out against any new gun control laws in the state.